This is an image I made a few days ago on Windermere. I'm genuinely pleased with it. And this is exactly what my camera gave me on the afternoon I took it. A flat sky, no drama, a few showers, the kind of light most photographers look at and think, there's nothing here. I nearly packed up and went home. I didn't. And in today's video, I want to show you the complete journey from that uninspiring colour file through to the finished black and white image you just saw. And I want to show you that nothing about this required expensive gear or advanced software skills or a perfect day. I had one camera, one lens, one filter, no tripod, and I used a workflow that honestly anybody watching this could follow. Before we get into it, this video is sponsored by DxO, and I want to be straightforward about that. I've used 3 tools from the new Nik Collection 9 to create this image, and I'll introduce each one just before I show you how I used it in the edit. They're not add-ons or afterthoughts, they are genuinely part of how this image was made. Let me give you a brief intro for anyone who hasn't come across Nik Collection before. It's a suite of plugins that works inside Lightroom, Photoshop and DxO's own Photolab. You can use it standalone too. There are 7 plugins in total, and for black and white landscape work I predominantly use silver effects and colour effects. Occasionally I also use analog effects. Now in the new version Nik Collection 9, which was released this week, it's added 8 significant new features, and I'm going to focus on 3 that matter the most for this kind of work I do. The first is depth masks. This is an AI tool that reads your image and generates a depth map, essentially working out what's close to the camera and what's far away, without needing any embedded depth data. That means you can target adjustments based on distance. And for a landscape like this one, with layers of fells receding into the mist, that's really useful. I can lighten the far distance independently of the foreground without drawing a single manual mask. The second is halation, which is in colour effects, and this one I was particularly pleased to see. Halation is what happens with older analog film stocks, when bright highlights bleed softly into the surrounding darker areas. It's a subtle glow, sometimes with a very faint warm halo, and it's a quality that fine art black and white printers have been chasing for years. Now there's a dedicated, fully controllable tool for it. Brightness, radius, intensity, hue, all adjustable, and it can be applied locally. You'll see exactly how I used it on this image. And the third is color grading, which is new to Color Efex. Instead of working with multiple separate wheels, you get a single wheel with independent control over shadows, midtones and highlights. There's also a global adjustment too. Now, for applying a refined paper tint to a black and white image, which is one of the final things I do in my workflow, this is a much more intuitive way to work. I'll show you all 3 in the edit, but firstly, let me show you how I got this image. One thing worth mentioning before we go to the location footage, the afternoon I made these images, the flat colour original you've just seen, it was a grey overcast day with some showers around. The footage I shot on location when making this video is from a different day in brighter conditions. I have mentioned that in the edit, but I didn't want to catch you out. The technique, the gear, the thinking, all of that is exactly the same. It's just that this image demonstrates the features of Nik 9 much better. The weather just didn't cooperate with my filming schedule, which, if I'm honest, felt like a fairly appropriate problem to have, given that the whole video is about not waiting for perfect weather conditions. I'm going to show you can still try and take artistic photos even under difficult circumstances. What's more, I'm making it easy for myself by just choosing minimal gear, no tripod. I'm just going to use a few tricks to get that artistic look. Let me just talk you through my setup. I've got a Sony a7R5. I've got a 24 to 240 lens, and I just bought this because it's light, and I know I need about 200 millimeters to get this view I'm looking for. The other thing I'm doing on the front here, I've got a 10-stop ND filter. And what I'm aiming to do is get an exposure time of just a few seconds. So how you set your camera up is, having fitted my ND filter, I just play with the aperture till I've got a shutter speed of about 2.5 seconds and vary it for the photos till I get the effect I want. Now, when you're taking the shot, the secret is to hold the camera steady on the main subject. In my case, it's these two mountain peaks, and then move it after you've held it on those for, you know, something like a second. You just count a second in your head and then do the movement. And the movement I'm doing is really very subtle. It's just a tiny little movement. I'll show you how it is. I'm exaggerating it in these shots, but it's just a little movement left and right, and I'm following the horizon because that's the nature of this photo. So I'm just following the horizon a little bit, and what that's going to do, it'll blur the water and it'll blur the sky, and that's really the problem with this photo, is that that's what's making it uninteresting, is the light. But I'm going to convert it to black and white, and by blurring this a bit I can bring in some more artistic interpretation. And part of the secret is you just twist your hips a tiny bit. You don't actually have to move your head or anything, just twist from the waist. So this is a photo I've taken. It's a bit of a dull day, and I want to use this image because I want to demonstrate some of the new features in Nik Collection 9, and they'll come out better with this rather dull image. So the first thing I do is I take my image into Lightroom, and as you can see, the technique of using a bit of ICM has created a slightly misty look, definitely to the sky and also slightly to the foreground. So I'm going to do a few things first. The first thing I do is I go and remove any dust spots, and you can just do that now in this tool here, and you click apply and it'll straight away take away the dust spots. So that's the first thing to do. The next thing I'm going to do is crop this, because I actually shot it with a format of being square, 1 to 1 to 1. So I'll change that to 1 to 1 and position my crop where I want it to be, which I'm going to take to something round about there, I think is what I want. Just lining up those mountains just at the point I want. So that's my crop. And then I'm going to do really just a very basic adjustment. And I'm going to do that using the tone curve. So all I want to do is bring out a little bit of the detail, particularly in the woodland that's in this sort of mid-ground, and a bit of detail in the mountains as well. So I'm probably just going to lighten that up a little bit. Bit too much, and this is just, I'm just looking at what's going on the screen. I want to darken, just keep that sky looking dark and moody. Would it help if I brought that down? No, it's a bit too much. Okay, until I end up with something that looks like that. So now I'm happy with that. I'm now going to read it into the Nik Silver Effects, and this is a plugin straight from Photoshop, so I can go straight to editing, and you can see there I've got Nik 9 Silver Effects. So we'll read it into that, and I generally set it to a resolution at least around about 240, because that's you could set it to 300 as well if you're really thinking about printing this. So here I have my file opened in Nik Silver Effects. Now over on the left hand side on this panel, you'll see there's a lot of presets, and what I often do is I just flick through those presets and just scroll down through them to see if there's one that sort of leaps out to me and gives me, oh, that's the kind of look I'm aiming for, because it can be a shortcut to help you to getting started. And let me just go back up. So let's have a look at something. I quite like that. Let's have a look at that, the high structure. It's got a bit too much going on in the background, but it's quite a nice one. any of these push processors. You can also favorite any that you like. So ones that you use regularly, you can see this one's got a yellow star by it, and that's because I've made it a favorite. And then you can filter by all your favorites, and it'll just bring up the ones you use regularly. Let me just take that off. See if there's anything. If you can't find anything you want, then I would normally then go straight to the one at the top, which is neutral. So let me take that. And then again, I might play with the tone curve here. And you can also play with, so you've got some, let me go through the options on the right hand side. So the obvious thing, your histogram. Then you've got color filters. So these are the filters you would have traditionally applied with old black and white film. And if you play with the sliders, you'll see what effect that has on it. So this red one is just darkening up the trees a little bit. So I might add a little bit of that. Let's have a look at the green. Green doesn't have big influence. Let's try blue. And the blue, see how it changes the effect of the mist on the hills there. And I quite like the mist, so I'm just gonna use a little bit of blue. And then you can again play with your curves, and you can see if I drag that down, it'll make it darker. I am going to drag it down a little bit, and I'm going to boost it a little bit because I want it a little bit lighter in the sky. So that's that done, and I can then add some filters. So the filters are all here. So if I open up that, you'll see you've got, again, you can have favorites. The one I tend to use most of all is probably the basic adjustment. So if I hit plus, it'll add it over here. And I usually start with dynamic brightness because I think that works really well. And see what I want to do with that. And I want to darken it down a wee bit, I think. So what I'm aiming for is quite a surreal, moody feel, because that's the that's what I want the viewer to feel when they look at these images. And then I next move usually onto the midtones, because that has the most dramatic, most of the images in midtones. And I just adjust that slightly. I might want to take out some structure. I usually reduce the fine structure. But now I'm going to add some local adjustments. And this is where the big differences come with Nik 9, especially if you're used to using Nik 8. And you'll see you can now do, instead of previously you just had these control point masking, now you have these AI masks, and that's a huge improvement. And the one I really like particularly is depth mask, especially for an image like this where I want to perhaps change the feel of the fog and the mist to it. So you can do that. You've also got luminosity masks, color masks, area selection, and object selection. So let me just add a depth mask. And as you can see, as you move it around, you can see which areas it affects. And then you can alter the sliders, or on the right-hand panel here, you've got a bunch of sliders there as well. So we can play with things like the brightness, and see I could darken those hills, or I could lighten them up. I'm doing that very extreme. And just let me show you one other feature for this. I'm going to leave that a bit extreme here at the minute, just so you can see. But just above it, on the mask options, you can show, this is right, like from foreground to your background. So I can drag this little thing and it'll move from the foreground to the middle ground and right up to the background. And you can make it a little bit wider. You can pull these little pointers out as to which you want, and you can drag this out to increase the kind of feathering, if you like, of the depth mask. So I'm going to just get a little bit, I want to get just a weeny bit in that middle ground there. So I'm going to pull this brightness back down now. So see there, and at the bottom here you can see on this little thing you can show what the mask is doing. So I can have no mask, or I could have for example a black and white mask. and you can see which parts of the image you're affecting, and we can go back to a mask overlay. Okay, now that I'm happy with that, is there anything else I want to do? Just let me show you the other things you can do. So you can do some selective toning. Clear view is, I guess, what it's a little bit like clarity, so you can see how much it affects the detail you've got in your image. So I'm going to add some clear view. I'm going to use the low option. I need to click plus there. There it is. And you can vary the intensity from 0 to 100%. 100% is far too much. I'm going to pull that back to just around about 15–20%, I think, something like that. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm happy with that. And what I'm going to do now is apply that. Once it's done that, it'll take it back into Lightroom. So here it is back in Lightroom. Now the next thing I'm going to do, I know this might sound a little bit weird, but I'm actually going to edit this in Nik Color Efex. So I'm going to go to Nik Color Efex, and the reason I'm going to Color Efex is it's because it's got some filters in there that aren't in Silver Efex, and I want to add those to my image. So one of the things I want to do is I want to add more of this misty feel. So I'm going to add, first of all, I'm going to add some fog. Now I don't want the fog to appear over the whole image, so I'm going to add a local adjustment, and I'm going to again use this depth mask. And if I change the opacity, you'll see the effect there. See how that's increased the fog in the foreground? And I'm going to add some more fog actually over the water as well. So let me do another one. And again, I'm going to use another depth mask, and I'm going to do this down here. Let's stretch this out here to get more of my foreground. Stretch that down that way. So now I've got the fog coming in over the water. I've left my trees sort of out the fog. I might just boost it up a little bit just by changing. That's a bit too much. Now let me pull back the opacity a bit. Just make it a little bit more subtle. So now I've got fog, a bit of fog in my foreground and in my and in the sky. So it's starting to get that kind of moody feel I want. Okay, now I can look at adding some other effects that I want to use. Now, because I want this kind of moody ethereal thing, I want the image to feel a little bit cool as well. So you've got a whole bunch of filters you could use here, and there's one for brilliance and warmth, and I could give it a slightly cool color feel to there. Let's see how that works. So that works quite nicely. I might just tone it down a little bit. So one of the things I want to do, and this is a new feature of Nik 9, is add a bit of glow into the sky. You can see that the clouds, it's sort of grey in this top bit, and then there's a white bit. So I'm going to use this filter called halation. And what halation does is it adds the glow. So you can see straight away it's gone rather red there. But if I tone it down to something like a light form, then, or even, let me try, what would a blue mood look like? Bit too exaggerated, I think. You can get a green haze. But the one I think I like the best is light. So I'm going to do that. And you can alter, obviously, the intensity of that. It's too much, so let's pull it back to. I like to take things as far over-exaggerated and then pull them back, because you don't know what your boundaries are until you push them. And it's better to sort of push them and then think, oh, that's too much, and pull it back. You can increase the spread, and you can change the sensitivity of it. So, yeah, I think that looks about right. So now it's starting to get the feel I want. So I'm going to apply that. Now, the final thing I'm going to do, actually, is I'm going to take it into another of the Nik Collection packages, and I'm going to edit it in Nik Analog Efex. And the reason I want to go into analog effects is it's because it gives me some extra options. I'll just show you some of the other things you can do. You can obviously add things like lens distortion, bokeh. You can add some blur, for example. I could add some motion blur to the water, perhaps. Actually, it wants to be... See how that's added a nice motion blur to the water? Motion blur. And I take the strength back down. Okay, and now I've got some extra blur in the water. I need to expand this out because I'm getting a lot of stuff in the trees, which I don't want. I just want it confined more to the water. So, something like that. Okay, now let me have a look at some of the other things you could add. There is a new thing called this glass effect, so it's a bit like you are looking through glass onto your image, and you can choose all sorts of... I'm actually not going to use this on this image, but I can show you some of the effects of what it can do. So if you're looking for some sort of more creative views, you can get all these weird and wonderful glass effects. There's a bit more... I can see you could use that for street photography if you want to create the effect of looking through a window or whatever. So we get all those effects. So let me just get rid of that glass effect. Let's have a look at the color cast ones. Okay, so you can select categories up here in the top. I'm going to have a look at categories. Let's have a look. Light leak. These are quite interesting. We're better, obviously, on color images and black and white, but you can see the sort of effects that a light leak would give you some very wonderful effects. There's one other great new tool you can use in Nik Color Effects, and that's the color grading tool. It saves you having to do this in Lightroom or Photoshop, and you get a very similar wheel actually. So first of all, let me just talk you through that. So at the top here you have your blending modes, and this is another new option. So you can choose from blending modes you're probably familiar with from Photoshop, things like lighten, screen, and so on. I'm just going to leave that on normal for now. And then beneath that you can do, if you click on this little icon, you can do global adjustments. And then over here you have the 3 separate adjustments for shadows, for midtones, and for highlights. Now I wanted to give this more of a bluer feel, so I'm going to start with my shadows and I'm going to move them over into the blue region, and you can see as you pull it out towards the circumference it gets more intense, and as you slide it into the center it becomes lighter. You can also do that on a balance slider beneath, and if I rotate this round you can see the effect of the different colors. So I'm just going to do a very subtle blue to that. I'm going to do pretty much the same with the midtones as well, because I want them to be slightly bluer, but I'm going to make them a tiny bit warmer. And finally the highlights, and again I'm going to do the same with them, drag them out here and make them perhaps a little bit more towards let's go slightly more towards the green. So that gives you then your final color coding. I can apply that and go back into Lightroom, and that's my finished image. So there it is, a flat grey afternoon on Windermere, 1 camera, 1 lens, 10-stop ND filter, no tripod, and a workflow that's built around silver effects and color effects. The depth mask handling the distant fells and helping me to add that mist filter just where I want it. The halation brings that analog quality to the highlights, and the color grading wheel placing that final cool tint exactly where I want it. Nothing in this process requires Photoshop skills, and nothing requires special gear. What it really requires is a clear sense of what you're trying to make the image feel like, and then a set of tools that are responsive enough to help you get there. Nik Collection is available now, and if you're a new user, use the code Richard at checkout. It gets you 15% off. It's only on new licenses, not on upgrades, I'm afraid. And there's a link in the description. Now, before you go, I've put together a free ebook that I think you'll find genuinely useful. It's called The Art of Intentional Black and White Photography, and it covers the thinking behind the kind of work you've seen in this video, not a list of camera settings. the actual creative framework I use when I'm deciding what to shoot, how to compose, and how to edit with intention rather than just instinct. If that sounds like something you'd find useful, there's a link to download it in the description. I'd also recommend you sign up to receive my regular newsletter, in which I send tips, reflections on my own work, and an occasional behind-the-scenes piece. I don't send stuff out daily, it's not salesy, it's just the kind of thing I'd like to read myself. By the way, the ebook is free, and you can unsubscribe from the newsletter at any time you like. Most people don't. There is a link also in the description. Now go out and have some fun with your own camera, and I'll see you in the next video.